now that our weaving boards have had a chance to dry, what we need to do is create the strings that go along the board like this. Those are called the warp strings. You're going to take whatever color you choose of yarn and take a piece of masking tape and simply taping on the back like that. Make sure it's nice and secured down. Now you're going to take those strings and go in those grooves. If you get it too tight, it's going to be hard to weave later. So I'm undoing my yarn, keeping it somewhat loose. So that's what our warp strings look like. That's what the back looks like. Give yourself a tail, another piece of tape, run it across there, and again, just really tape it down. You can use your fingernail, try to get everything taped down nice and in place. We're going to start creating the hair for our self-portrait. What we're going to be using kind of as a needle tool will actually be a popsicle stick, and taking one end of the color that you're choosing to use for your hair, you're going to take a piece of masking tape. We're going to take this and just wrap it around the end of our popsicle stick like that. Now what we want to do is basically just load up the popsicle stick with our hair color, and so you're going to wind it all the way to the end and wind it all the way back to where the tape end is. And you're just going to keep doing this, going back and forth, loading up your popsicle stick until you have about 8 or 10 rows of yarn on there. And that's what a view of it looks like after you have loaded your popsicle stick with about 8 or 10 rows of yarn. You don't want to get it too thick, otherwise it's going to be hard to weave through the warp strings. Cut that off and put that back so that somebody else can use it. It doesn't matter what end you start on, but we are starting towards the top. Remember, we didn't paint that section down here because that's going to be our clothes. So we do want to start at the top where our hair will be. And working on the very outer string, make sure you leave yourself about a 5 or 6 inch tail, and you're going to simply knot this 3 times. 1, 2, 3. You can take that string now just to get it out of your way and tuck it behind your weaving board. Now, using your popsicle stick, you are simply going to do a weaving pattern. Go under, over, under, over, under, over, under. It looks like that. This string that we are running is called the weft string. We're going to take it and make sure you pull it all the way through just like that. It's okay to flip your board upside down when you're working. In fact, I find it easier to do. And now we're going to repeat the process again. We're going to go over, under, over, under, over, under, and over that string. Every time, making sure that we pull all the way through. You also want to take time to use your fingers to pull the strings nice and closely together, row by row. Now you don't want to yank this so tight. You just want to pull it tightly enough that it's not a loose yarn in there. You're going to continue this process until you have a nice section for your hair. You can even use your popsicle stick to help push the strings together. Since this is the beginning of your weaving, you really want to make sure that you get a nice start to it, otherwise it messes up the rest of the project. So after about my 5th row, I've taken time to make sure everything is really as far up to the top as it can go. You can notice that the yarn is almost straight with my slits on my weaving board. You can't see much of the green warp strings. I'm trying to really fill it in with the weft and make sure it's nice and tight and has a good start. This would be the hair at the very top. Everything's nice and tight. I've gotten to the point where I am now done with my hair, and kind of as a measuring tool, the tip of your finger, there's a top knuckle right there. About that dimension is how big, how wide your hair needs to be. You're going to cut, again, leaving yourself about a 5 or 6 inch tail, and you're just gonna wrap it around your warp string and tie a knot 3 times. Now I'm a girl, and so I want mine to purposely look like it has pigtails. Remember what the finished example looks like. So if you're a girl, you want to be able to have some pigtails at the end to tell that it's a girl. If you are a boy, what you would do is take your 2 strings, the one that started and the one that ended. I want you to wrap it through your board just like that, nice and tight. I'm pulling it, and using a piece of tape, you're gonna tape that off on the back just like that. That way you have short hair like a boy would. For my girls in the class, you're gonna leave those out like that. Using your remaining strings, what you're going to do is wrap it loosely around the palm of your hand. And I would say to do this 5 or 6 times. I pinched it so that I didn't lose it when I pulled it off my hand. And what I'm gonna do is cut on this side of the loop. Pull those strings apart. So I have some nice long strings now. Taking 3 of them, separate your hair a little bit. Now I've made kind of a hole. And now I'm using closed scissors to poke it through that hole. And I'm gonna do my last one. I now have 4 on this side because I have 1 string that I started with. I have 4 on this side because I have the string that I finished with. And I'm gonna simply take those, wrap them around my finger, and knot them into one big knot. Pull tight, and there's your hair for 1 pigtail. And now I'm gonna do the same thing to the other side. And then when you're finished, scrunch your hair back together so you can't tell that there was a hole there. If there's any trimming you need to do, like I feel like that string's a little long, you can do a little trimming, and now you have your hair for the girls. The rest of the yarn that was left on the popsicle stick, you're gonna wanna pull that off and simply untape it. For a big piece like that, I will have a scrap bin that you can put it in. For little pieces like this, you can just throw them in your table trash can. Just like you had to pick a hair color that was similar to yours, now you're going to pick a skin color. That could be tan or peach, depending on what your skin color is. So you decide. We're gonna repeat the same step with our popsicle stick. To start the skin, doesn't matter which side you start on. I'm gonna leave about a 5 or 6 inch strand and tie it 3 times on my warp strings. You're gonna leave the tail this time going across your warp strings, and as you do your weft, still going under, over, under. If you notice, what I'm trying to do is pull that extra string, and what we're doing is called hiding it. So we're just gonna keep it in there as we're going over, under, and weaving. What we're gonna try to do is hide that tail since it's too far away from up here to do anything with. Now, if it still ends up sticking out, then I'll show you a way at the end to tape it. You can even take your fingers and try to tuck it in. I'm getting to the point where the face is getting large enough. It should be just a little bit thicker than what the hair was at the top. Now I'm going to go ahead to finish off this color, give it a tail, 5 or 6 inches, and I'm going to simply tie it 3 times. We're going to take that extra and run it across our warp strings, and we're going to try to hide it with our scarf color. And now you're ready to choose your scarf color. You don't need nearly as much yarn this time. You could probably just wrap it 3 or 4 times. So much thinner, something like that. Giving it a tail and tying it 3 times. This time the extra can stay off because this is going to be a scarf, and scarves usually have a fringed side to them, so you can leave that tail out, but we're trying to cover up the skin tail. When it comes to the scarf, you don't want it to be very thick at all because it's just supposed to be around the neck. You do want to make sure that you end the scarf color on the same side that you started it. Again, you're going to simply cut a 5 or 6 inch tail. Since it's such a thin area, you can actually tie that to the beginning yarn, just like this, 3 times. Now you all want to have a fray, so what you're going to do is use that extra yarn, wrap it around the palm of your hand, and I would say to do it 4 or 5 times and cutting only on one side. Now I have these nice long strings. Taking those strands now, you're gonna put them around your warp strings, just like this. Make sure they're even on both sides, and now tie it. If they are uneven, just trim that off. They don't have to be perfect though, it should be somewhat messy. And that's how you make the tail for your scarf. My last color is my shirt color, and I'm picking yellow for that. And we're gonna repeat the step one last time. I'm gonna choose to tie mine this time over here, just so I can avoid all that mess of the scarf. Give yourself a tail, tie it 3 times. Run the tail over the warp strings so that it will get hidden, and start weaving under, over, under, over. As it gets more and more difficult to get your popsicle stick in there, really push the yarn together, and that way you have some space to weave. And when we're all done weaving the shirt, then we can stretch that yarn back out a little, just to make the weaving process easier, because you can see how it really starts to get stuck. And that's also why you don't want to put too much yarn on your popsicle stick. We're going to probably do 6 or 8 rows of the shirt color, and then I'll show you how to stretch it back out. Again, I'm going to cut a tail. I'm going to simply take that shirt color and tuck it behind. We want it to be all the way at the top of the weaving board and all the way to the bottom. Be sure to remove all tape. You are now done with the popsicle sticks, so I will collect those.